Hello, everybody. This is the LumberKong channel. My name is Mitchell. Uh, Today, I will be ranking the top 10 Infinity Saga movies. I will be using top 10 lists not necessarily as like defining what is the clerically best movie of any general group or genre. I'll probably do top 10s that aren't movies, aren't maybe video games, stuff along those lines. But this is not a clerical thing. This is not definitively ranking the top 10. This is my personal opinion. These are the movies that I like the best or I think are the best, just in terms of my personal tastes. More than anything, I think this is just a discussion topic. I have my own list. I've kept a list for I think 5 or 6 years at this point of a ranking list of the top 10 that I have personally. I've also today, as a bit of a fun exercise, gone to the sorta.app website, and they have an Infinity Saga ranking list that you can try out for yourself. Me personally, I've held probably the same opinions on most of these for quite a while. I think the only real changes might have been towards the top of the list, but even then, I think they're all so close. If you really asked me on any given day, I'd probably give you a different answer. But that being said, we're going to go ahead and start with number 10, The Avengers. This one is one of the more entertaining movies of the bunch. It is the first of the team up movies. I'm not one who particularly gives bonus points for those kinds of things. If you're the first, that's great. I would like to see it done better if it's possible, and I will give extra bonus points when they do great sequels. And I would argue that the Marvel movies are some of the best in terms of raising the perception of sequels in general, because you look back at the history of sequels and it's not exactly fraught with 10 out of 10s. With that being said, I think The Avengers is genuinely one of those great tentpole Hallmark movies that we wound up getting a chance to really enjoy the coming together of the original Avengers team. The dynamics in the first movie are good. The action sequence in the Battle for New York is really good. Loki plays a very fun villain. You get a lot of fun interactions between Captain America and Iron Man, who will later go on to define most of the movies after this. It is not the greatest Avengers movie by any stretch of the imagination, but it is still genuinely an enjoyable movie. Number 9, The Guardians of the Galaxy. I really enjoy the Guardians movies. I think one is the weakest of all of them. It is, in my personal opinion, I'm not the biggest bring the gang together guy. I'd rather have established relationships and enjoy the dynamics that we've already built up over a course of time, but that it also takes the first movie to get there. It is a genuinely enjoyable film. It's the first of the major, we're going the more comedic route with some action built in. The team comes together, and all of them, admittedly, are cast outs and criminals and all of the different, quote unquote, undesirables of the wider galaxy. But it gives you a look into the Marvel cosmos that we had yet to really get a chance to see. It is a group of characters that not anybody in the world knew about before it came out. Uh, these movies actually inspired me to go back and read through all of the Guardians comic books from the first publication in 2005, where they had started with the current Guardians team. It is a really enjoyable film. I think that the sequels do it better. They have more heart and more depth, but the relationship, especially towards the end where Peter is dealing with the loss of his mom in a way that he never really had before, uh, Gamora finding a family, Rocket and Groot finding a home, Drax finding people that he might also care about now that his family is gone. I think generally this is just one of those. Yeah, if you get the chance to put it on, it's a good film. Number 8, Black Panther. This movie is really entertaining. I think that it has some of the best style of an MCU movie. It was an event movie, that's for sure. I felt like there were plenty of people that came just for Black Panther. Maybe never saw a Marvel movie before, and it was just, hey, we're going to see Black Panther because that shit looks awesome. And that's kind of what happened. I mean, it T'Challa is not like a oh my god, blow me away. He's incredibly funny, or I love any of his in particular scenes, but I think what I enjoyed the most about T'Challa is his wrestling with history and wrestling with how do I become a better king than those that came before me, and I still respect the people that came before me. It's not the wild entertainment ride of a movie, but what it is more than anything is it's an interesting conflict movie between the hero and the villain, because Killmonger is an incredible villain. There are so many good moments. Michael B. Jordan absolutely brings that feeling and that person to life in a way that, I'm a comic person. I had never heard of Killmonger before. The overall design of Wakanda is fantastic. Shout out to M'Baku and Okoye, who I think steal all the scenes that they're in. They're great. And I think the rest of the cast does an amazing job. Number 7, Spider-Man: Homecoming. This is another one of those where it gets really difficult because ultimately I think this could be anywhere from 7 to 2 depending on what your particular opinions are. This movie is so good. The suit I think looks amazing for the world that they have already set out. I think all of the kids do a really good job of being a great ensemble and having all of those funny little high school dynamics that go on. Even the small details like Captain America being the training video in the gym class, Hannibal Buress being the gym teacher is really funny for the few scenes he's in. The small details like the principal being the great grandson or the grandson of one of the Howling Commandos, which was always pretty fun. But ultimately, the real crux of the movie and where it shines so much is the Adrian Toomes Vulture villain and how he really does put into perspective like what does the ultimate impact of Tony Stark in the Marvel universe end up being. And the reveal when Peter goes to pick up Liz Allen for Homecoming and you open the door and it's Adrian Toomes and you go, "Oh my god." In the theater on opening weekend, the gasp was incredible. It was one of those absolute magic moments that you cannot replicate. As soon as it's over and everybody knows it's out of the bag and you can't go back, but damn was it good. I really enjoyed the hell out of this movie. It was one of those dreams to see Peter Parker in the MCU, and man, did they deliver. This movie is excellent. It's hard to put it this low, but man, that shows how good I think the rest of them are. So, number 6, Thor Ragnarok. This movie is a cheat code for me. It's so funny. There are so many good moments. You get a lot of character development from most of the characters involved. Hela's a pretty good villain. Hulk and Thor are two of my probably 3 favorite Marvel characters in general. I have a Thor tattoo, so this is all going in the same bucket. I really just enjoy the comedy of this movie. I think the visual styling is immaculate. I think people are souring on this movie as it gets older because I think it's a little bit of a hangover from Thor Love and Thunder, but you have to remember where Thor 1 and 2 come from. And I don't even really hate Thor 1. I think Thor 2 just drags down the whole quadrilogy. Really, if you're going to ask anybody on the street, the Sakaar storyline I think was done pretty well. It wasn't adapted as a Hulk thing, it was adapted as like a Thor situation, but I think that overall I enjoy the entirety of the movie. It's funny from start to end. It has amazing action sequences, and come on, it's got Immigrant Song in it. What are we doing? Number 5, The Winter Soldier. This one becomes incredibly tough for me to rank because when you come down to it, I think this might be the best start to finish film classical movie depiction of any character in the MCU. Captain America makes the third leg of my trifecta of favorite characters. This is just almost a perfect movie to sit down and watch. It's got the political intrigue of like a Jason Bourne movie. It's got all the action you expect from an MCU movie. It's got a bit of levity, but man, does it have some weight to it. When you find out that Bucky's the Winter Soldier, man, that's a gut punch. And the introduction of so many fun side characters. You get Crossbones, who becomes a recurring villain, who is okay, not great. But then you end up getting Sam as Falcon, who obviously eventually will become Captain America himself. You get the reintroduction of Bucky after he dies in First Avenger. But then the revelation, as Steve gets it, is incredibly impactful upon him as a character. And I think honestly, this movie, for me, my enjoyment comes from the very start. The list and the on your left moment in this movie, I think really just had me falling in love with it immediately. And I'm already a sucker for Captain America, but just the dynamic that happens between him and Sam, I I'll watch. I'm a Lethal Weapon kid. I enjoyed the hell out of those movies when I was a kid. So getting something even approaching that in the MCU, just it's the recipe to make me love it. Number 4, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. This is the first MCU movie that made me cry. When father and son starts playing at the end of the movie, and Yondu turns to ashes, and Kraglin's jumping up and down, and everybody on the ship is crying. I was sitting in my seat in the theater, crying like a baby for no reason, because this is a fictional character. I shouldn't be this invested in somebody who's objectively, over the course of the first 2 movies, kind of an asshole. But this movie does such a good job between the jokes of getting you to care about every one of the characters in their own ways and for their own reasons. And I cannot praise James Gunn enough for doing something, both in the first one introducing us to a bunch of characters we didn't know anything about and making us care about them, but then switching it around and making us care about them so much that you get so emotionally invested in just their own relationships to each other. And the relationship between Peter and Gamora really flourishes in this movie. You get the opportunity to get Mantis and Drax, somebody for each of them to latch onto in their own ways. The raising of Groot is pretty funny, and the relationship between Yondu and Rocket really, I think, punctuates the movie, because you get that really effective dialogue at the end of the movie where Yondu is saying, essentially, I also steal the batteries. I'm an asshole to people even though I shouldn't be. I do all these bad things, and it's because I can't allow somebody to love me because I hate myself. And there's just so much about this movie that I could praise. I could go on for hours, but this is, I think, pretty solidly my favorite Guardians movie, and it really hurts putting it at 4. I could make an argument for it being my favorite, but this is about where it should land in my mind, and there's only up from here. Number 3, Captain America: Civil War. There's so much to talk about with this. You have the introduction of Black Panther and Spider-Man. You have one of my favorite fights in the airport scene. That is one of the best. I enjoy the small moments of this movie as well. You get the relationship between Sam and Bucky, them really meeting and interacting for the first time in a relationship that I think evolves into being one of my favorites throughout the entirety of the series. There is, the conversations that Steve and Tony have of the theoretics of what are our problems here, what are our solutions, should we sign on to the Sokovia Accords, should we not, what are we going to do with the consequences of our actions? And in doing so, I think this creates one of the best moral conflicts of all of the movies, insofar as Iron Man has to deal with the consequences of his actions in a way that he never really has to before, because they get thrown in his face at every turn in this movie. And you have Steve Rogers, who, understanding the conflicts and the consequences of the actions that they have taken, realizes that, hey, the entire point of the Avengers is not that we are stopping everything before it happens, or that we're perfect. It's that we are humans doing our best to help protect others. And it really gets down into what is the role of a hero in this world. And I just enjoy top to bottom, start to finish. This is one of those great movies. There's It holds number 3 because there's just so much right with it that it's hard to argue against. Number 2, Avengers Infinity War. This movie is Empire Strikes Back. That's the closest I can come to giving an analogy for what this feels like. It is the, oh my god, what happened? What are we gonna do next? How do we get it? How do we get out of this? You know, the good guys lose. How do we move on from this? Half of the world is gone. This movie has consequences, which in long series like this, that's really hard to do and do well. But this movie does it immaculately. There are so many good things you can say about this movie, including the fact that they created probably the greatest villain in any of these Marvel movies. I would argue maybe comic book movies in general. I don't know how you argue against Thanos being number one. You know, he winds up snapping away half of the universe at the end of this movie. And back before we knew what was going to happen, when you went the opening couple of weeks and you didn't know what was going to happen, at the end of this movie, it's shocking. It's devastating. Watching Sam and Bucky and eventually Peter fade away and hearing him pleading for his life in Iron Man's arms is a gut-wrenching performance by Tom Holland and one of the all-time saddest moments in movie theaters that I've ever been a part of. I mean, there were people weeping at the end of that movie. There was shell shock that happened after the end of Infinity War. This movie has amazing fights and it has amazing interactions between all these characters we had wished had interacted before now. But more than anything, I think this movie gets so much praise and ranks so highly because Thanos is amazing as a villain, and oh my god, I can't believe they just did that. How do we get out of this? Like, the heroes have to win in the end, don't they? Didn't they just lose? How does Endgame fix this? You know, it's an almost indescribable feeling watching this movie for the first time and feeling that sense of dread of, oh my god, they lost. How the hell do they move on from this? And there was only one way. Number 1, Avengers Endgame. I will never forget sitting in a theater and watching this movie. It has to be, for me, it's the way that people describe watching Star Wars for the first time, or watching one of the seminal movies of their lifetime in a theater with people and having a communal experience about what's going on the screen, and everybody's enraptured and they're all together and in lockstep in enjoying and waiting for what's happening. The beginning where you get the Thanos has won, he is retired to a place, the Infinity Stones are gone, and Thor killing Thanos. It should feel cathartic because now you've seen the bad guy lose, but it almost hurts more now. And after a full year of theorizing of what could they possibly do to end this, getting the first 5 to 10 minutes in, you have the original Avengers and Captain Marvel and Rocket all show up and kill Thanos. After that, it jumps to 5 years later, and I remember sitting in the movie theater just absolutely stunned that happened. And then Dear Mr. Fantasy starts playing, and you see just the desolation of New York, and you that song specifically, I love the song choice because you just feel like this withering longing of a time that's no longer there, and like the weight of on the shoulders of the people who are left, and that whole feeling. And this is a 3-hour movie. Like there is no shortage of things going on in this movie, and I I feel like I can still remember all of the details. I still feel like I could throw my mind back to being right there when it happened. The 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 feeling of being there and experiencing it when like you get to know as soon as anybody else does. How do the Avengers get out of this situation? How does the end game play out? And I know there's a lot of controversy within the is Endgame better or is Infinity War better, because a lot of people have a lot of problems with the time travel aspect of Endgame. And while I'm not the biggest time travel proponent, I think this movie does it very well. I think that getting to go backwards and see all these different moments, getting to have the Guardians go back to Guardians 1, getting to have Tony go back and interact with Howard. Now at the end of it, knowing that Tony was getting ready to die, and then him getting to have that one final interaction with his dad that he seems to always be longing for throughout all of those movies. It really is beautiful. And then, I think they just wrap it up perfectly. Giving Sam the shield, moving into Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which I also really enjoy. There's the wrapping up of, we get to have Tony Stark's funeral. We get to send Captain America back to be with Peggy Carter. It is, after a year of theorizing and wondering and hoping and trying to figure out what's going to happen, I cannot give enough praise for both surprising me as an audience member and also wildly exceeding my expectations on what they were going to do. The in-game fight is amazing. I love it. It has, I don't know how I don't put Captain America wielding Mjolnir and having that fight as number one, if it weren't for the fact that as soon as that fight is over, you then get the Avengers Assemble moment, and then the big fight happens, and that has just as many good moments. You get to have all of the battlefield interactions. You get to feel like every character does something within that movie. I just can't heap enough praise onto this. For me, it's number one with a bullet. I completely understand why somebody would choose any of, basically from 7 onwards. I understand why you choose that movie to be your number one. But for me, I just have to choose the wrap-up. It's the best movie I've ever seen, live and in person, when it comes to giving a satisfying ending to what's happening. And I think with that, this is going to be the end of my first video. Please interact with it however you like. Thank you for sticking around. I know that, very low chance of anybody really staying around for a small channel like mine, but I appreciate the time and coming along on the journey with me. Hopefully there'll be more to come, but for now, so long.